Over the past 20 years, we've rescued countless websites from bad hosting providers, from poor performance to insecure to just plain awful support. We have seen quite a few varieties as to why our custom services and software customers have come to us with hosting problems, and we have helped solve them and move them off those bad hosting providers. So have you ever wondered if your hosting provider's up to snuff? Do you think they're okay, but just aren't quite sure if they are good enough to really run your website reliably? Come join me as we explore the top questions and things that you should be looking at to make sure that your website server is what it needs to be to run your website well. Welcome to the E-commerce Made Easy podcast. I'm your host, Carrie Saunders. When we started this business, all I had was a couch, a laptop, and a 9-month-old. My main goal? To help others. Now, with over 20 years in the e-commerce building industry and even more than that in web development, I have seen a lot. I love breaking down the hard tech into easily understandable bits to help others be successful in their online business. Whether you're a seasoned e-commerce veteran or just starting out, you've come to the right place. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into the world of e-commerce together. Okay, so one of the first things that we need to look at when making sure that you're on a good hosting provider is how many other people are sharing that server and those resources. Now, this used to be super popular back in the day when we started BCS engineering, is hosting providers would put 20, 50 different clients on the same server without any sort of separation. You could see the other websites if you kind of knew what you were doing, and it posed quite the large security hazard. Now, most of the time now, hosting providers don't quite do this, but they do virtualize and share the server with other resources and other websites. So you just need to be making sure that your website's getting enough resources to run it well. One of the clues you can look at to see whether your website's being shared, or your resources really are being shared across multiple websites, is how cheap is your hosting. And this can be kind of a touchy subject for some people, but over 20 years of me helping other customers and hosting ourselves, I've seen quite a bit of issues with the super cheap hosting websites. So if you're really serious about your business, if you have just, say, a WordPress site, $10 a month is probably okay. Anything less, you're probably looking into super cheap hosting with very minimal resources and probably a lot less security. Now, if you want an e-commerce website and how much you should be paying for that, that's going to generally run in the $40 to $50 a month at this point in time pricing, and then can for sure go up from there, $200, $400, $600, $1,000 a month. It really just depends upon how big your website is. Of course, if you're paying $1,000 a month for your hosting, you better be selling a lot, and you probably are selling a lot because you're really demanding that much resources. So really the hosting cost generally reflect the resources and the services that you get with it. So just take a look at how much you're paying for your hosting, and feel free to ask your hosting provider, how many people are sharing this server with me? It shouldn't be a secret. They should have no problem letting you know that. At BCS Engineering, we have rules where we only allow a certain amount of sites on a server, and they're all virtualized so that the software can't interact with the other websites. And so we do it. So they're almost like little mini computers, but you just need to make sure that that's a case similar to that, where we give people dedicated CPUs if they're e-commerce, dedicated memory if they're e-commerce, hard drive space, etc. So you just need to make sure you're not sharing a CPU, which is the computer processing unit of the server, with somebody else, because you might run into some load issues and slowness on your website if that other website that's sharing it with you has a peak in traffic and is really using up the resources. So take a look at that. Now, one other thing that I think is super important, and thank goodness the internet is starting to trend towards this, but this is something we've always done here at BCS Engineering, is to make sure that only secure connections are allowed to the server. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, first off, One of the things that you could do is use an FTP client. It's called a file transport protocol is what that stands for. So an FTP client, most people just know it as a way to move files up to the server and pull them down. So it's a great way to get to your files if you have something that's a downloadable software like WordPress or an e-commerce that's downloadable, and edit the files and then upload them back. Back in the day, it was super common for all hosting providers, honestly, except for BSys Engineering and a few others that were really good, to use FTP. FTP is insecure. It's a plain password. So what that means is if I'm watching your server, because I know what I'm doing, I'll be able to see your username and password anytime you logged in, which means anybody out there who is a hacker could be watching your server, watching the FTP port, which can be a little bit of a techie word, but let's just say the way the traffic comes in, if you don't know what a port is, watching that port and looking for anytime you logged in, they can get your username and your password. So you want to make sure that your hosting provider you're with only provides a secure way to do that. So SFTP would be one way to do that and to make it encrypted, which means that somebody watching the server cannot see your password. It's encrypted and you just can't see it. You would need special tools and keys, which shouldn't be readily available to see that. So secure FTP is what you're going to want. Another thing is email. I have seen so many clients in all the years use insecure email ports. So here we are talking about ports again, but just think of it as like the door or the window into the server. It's kind of what the port is. They're just different little holes into the server. So if you use an insecure email port, they're going to be able to read your emails. They're going to be able to read your logging in and passwords, etc. So you don't want that either, right? So make sure that you're using an encrypted secure transport layer for your email. If you're not quite sure, we're going to have in our show notes the common ports that are the secure ports. So you should be able to see this when you set up your email with your hosting provider or look in your settings. But if you have any questions, feel free to drop us an email and we'll be happy to help you out. Another thing would be cPanel. Now at BSys Engineering, we don't use cPanel. We don't really feel that in general it's necessary for most people. For all of our hosting clients, they seem to be just fine without having cPanel. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with cPanel, but you do want to make sure that when you connect to cPanel, if your hosting provider does have it, that it is in a secure manner. So you want to make sure that the website URL you're going to get to your cPanel is HTTPS and that there's a valid security certificate there. So your browser is going to usually alarm you, especially now. Browsers are so much better about warning you if you're going to an insecure website. So if you get an insecure warning for your cPanel login, then that's a big red flag. And you need to be asking your hosting provider, how can I connect securely? And if they can't provide you a way to connect securely, then you need to find another hosting provider, honestly. Okay. So now that we've gone through security, let's go next into, does your hosting provider provide backups? Backups are crucial for running a business. So you need to make sure that your hosting provider is doing backups regularly for you. We talked about this a little bit in episode 1, but what I wanted to reiterate because it's just that important. So you need to make sure your hosting provider is backing up your website, your files, and your database every single night. Ideally, some people are gonna need it even more often than that. If you have a really heavy trafficked website, you might want it more often than that. See if your hosting provider can provide that. But once a night is generally a good idea, and they really should be keeping backups for at least a week, if not several weeks too. Because what I have found in the past is we will have clients come to us and realize that they're hacked. Well, they don't realize that they're hacked right away. They generally will realize it days or maybe a week later. And so if you have backups that go back farther, you can start with a better known state pre-hacking whenever you're trying to recover the site that way. So if you don't have backups that go back far enough, you might have a site that needs to be manually dehacked, I guess, if you want to call that a word. So you really having backups, we generally keep them here at BSys Engineering for 3 weeks. It all varies, but depending on your hosting provider. So make sure they're doing backups, ask them how long they keep it, etc. Okay, so on to the next one. Do they monitor your website? We have lots of customers who are non-hosting customers that their hosting provider doesn't monitor the website. It's something honestly that kind of blows my mind. We monitor all of our websites. Oh my gosh, we probably monitor them too much. We almost always know if one of our clients' websites goes down or gets too slow before they even realize it. So having a monitoring system in place on your hosting provider is really important. Now, there are also third-party monitoring services out there. If your hosting provider doesn't provide that, and if you do like them and they don't provide that, there are monitoring services out there that you can purchase on a subscription basis. But you really need to be monitoring your hosting. So what that means is one of the things we monitor here at BCS Engineering is something as simple as your disk space. We have seen clients' sites on other hosting providers go down because they ran out of room on their hard drive. Something as simple as logs filling up the server too much and them running out of room will take a whole site down. Or something else that we monitor, for example, is for our e-commerce hosting providers, we monitor something called ecom. So what that means is we test the server I think it's about every 5 minutes to see if it's responding fast enough. So if we start seeing a slowness in the time we get a response back on our tests, then we know something is going on that server. Either somebody is denial of servicing them, which is kind of another techie term, but what that basically means is they're sending a lot of traffic to your site for absolutely no other reason than to slow you down. It could also mean that somebody's trying to hack into the server. So they're trying all kinds of things really fast and trying to access your site and slowing it down. So we have an ecom alert on ours as well to see if the site's going too slow. Now, obviously, we have basic things like HTTP, making sure that the web server responds. So HTTPD is just an acronym for whether the web server responds. And then we also monitor SSL certificates, making sure they aren't about to expire. Domain names, we also monitor domain names. If you don't have your domain name on auto renew, it's kind of a little bit of a tangent. Make sure you have your domain name on auto renew. We have had clients lose their domain names and really have to fight to get them back. So we monitor our clients' domain names as well, just in case they don't have them on auto renew. Make sure that they don't lose their domain name because that's kind of the whole key of their business, especially if they're established. All right, so I think that's probably enough for monitoring the site. Hopefully that wasn't too techy. But if you do have questions on any of that, please feel free to drop us an email. Okay, next up, do they provide phone support or escalated support? We have a lot of clients that aren't hosted with us that might run into a hosting issue. Their site goes down, and then they come to us and like, hey, what's going on with our website? And we'll check it out. And we're like, okay, we think your host is down because we can't do X, Y, or Z. Well, then they try to contact their host, and then they wait, and then they wait. So you need to make sure that there's a way to really get somebody's attention if your site is down. That's one of the reasons why we monitor here at BCS Engineering is we want to know before you even know. We want to fix it fast. So make sure there's some sort of escalated support. The other really good hosting providers do provide this. So just make sure that that's in place. So that's kind of a simple subject there. Okay, so the next one is something we touched on in episode 1 is do they provide server software updates? So I'm going to go in a little bit more detail on that because it's super important from a security standpoint. So you're going to want to make sure that your host that you are with is a managed hosting provider. Unless you are super techy and understand servers and all the bits and pieces of servers, you're going to want to make sure you have a managed hosting provider. And so you need to be asking that because a lot of people we run into do not have a managed hosting provider. So what that means is if it's managed, then they manage the software that runs the server. So there's software like PHP. Probably have heard of that before. Most of the software that we work with is on PHP. WordPress is on PHP. The popular downloadable shopping carts are on PHP. So you need to make sure you're keeping up to date with the PHP updates so that your server is secure. Another thing they're going to need to be updating is MySQL. So that is the database that runs your website, whether it's WordPress or downloadable e-commerce software. You're going to need to make sure that they are updating that as well. Apache or Nginx are the web service type applications that are running on the server. Going to need to make sure those are updated. And then there's all kinds of services, little small services that are also underlying on the system. And I won't go into those techie details because they would get boring and this would get way too long if I did that. But just in general, you need to be asking your host, do you provide server software security updates for me? And then get a list of what they do and what they don't do. All right. So here's the next one. What about how fast are their servers? And do they know how to optimize a server? So we actually had a client just recently move to us, probably one of the busiest clients sites we've ever seen. And we have had some really big clients hosting with us, but this website is so popular. We were testing how many connections they were getting a second. I can't remember the numbers, but it was like 5 times more than our really big others client, which we thought was like crazy, like a lot too. Now, we ran into a problem where the server wasn't doing a whole lot, but the website was really slow. So what that entails is there's a bunch of configurations, and I won't go into the technical details underneath the hood because that would be way too boring, and that would, again, this would make this podcast way too long. But there were a lot of things we needed to understand and really dig into to get that server going fast. I mean, it is lightning fast now, but it was kind of a shock to us to see this site and the server doing really pretty much nothing. They had so much free memory and so much free computer resources, but yet the website was so slow. But we had to really tune Apache, which is the service that runs your website, to be able to handle the style of traffic they were getting. So the style of traffic they were getting was a lot of images were being pulled from their consumers, and they would send out newsletters every week for sales and things like that. And then they have one big newsletter also in the month, and it was pulling a lot of images from their website. And so that's not really resource intensive for a computer to serve up images because it's not really having to think much. It's not having to calculate, like adding to cart or like cart totals and things like that. So it's really kind of more of a simple thing to do. But there were just so many requests. The server didn't have enough HTTP processes. Basically, we'll just say that's just a simple way to say it. It's actually a lot more complicated than that to service them all up. So we had to really figure out how to optimize the web server for this special case. So not only do you need to make sure that your hosting provider is providing a fast enough server and understand what the bottleneck is, whether it's the software or the server. Somebody else, if they didn't, we know servers and software. So we could tell right away it wasn't the software that was slowing them down, because sometimes it could be the software, just inefficient code. But we knew it wasn't because we could see the resources weren't being utilized. So having a hosting company that can understand at least some of the software behind it too, to know where is the actual bottleneck is really good, especially when you get really serious into running your business. Okay, so hopefully that wasn't too techy for you. All right, so what is the reliability? Here's another one for you. What is the reliability? Do they have a guarantee? Most hosting companies will have a 99.9 at least guarantee uptime. So what that means is only 0.01 or only 0.1% of the time they might be down for the year. So it's a decent small percentage. It's a little better if you do 99.9 guarantee, but you can ask them, what is their uptime? I don't find this advertised nearly as much anymore as it used to be. So getting a good sense for their uptime, their services, look at their reviews on their hosting on their website. Make sure other customers are happy with them. Maybe if you have a specific niche that you want to ask other people in your area, where do you like to host? Who is a great hosting provider that you have great customer service and the servers are fast, etc. So talk with your peers and see whatever the places they like as well. Okay, and last but not least, can they scale and grow with you? So you don't want to be necessarily stuck at a hosting provider that can't grow any bigger, especially as you scale and get more popular and are bringing in more revenue, more traffic. You want to make sure that they can beef up the server and make it bigger for you, give you more CPU resources, give you more memory, and help you with that and help you best judge how much more resources do you actually need. Okay, so hopefully that wasn't too techy for you. I kind of sometimes geek out on hosting because I don't know, computers is just one of my passions as well, and it's been my passion for a very long time. And I also love software too, so I love meshing the two together, and it's just a really cool, neat puzzle to have, honestly. And I just love it. So hopefully that wasn't too geeky, but hopefully you got some good tidbits from it. And I know that sometimes listening to more of a technical podcast, you can kind of get lost on what I might have gone over. So just make sure you visit our show notes at the end of this episode to just kind of review what are these questions we need to be asking, because we will put them in our show notes in a nice bulleted format for you to visually see. But let's just recap real quick though. So first off, I talked about how many people are you sharing your server with? Kind of look at your hosting price. That's going to give you a little bit of a gauge. Ask your hosting provider too, if you would like. Also, make sure they only use secure connections to the server. So secure FTP, secure email, secure for cPanel, etc. So make sure you have only secure connections because we don't want to make it easy for hackers to get in. Okay, also, does your hosting company back up the site? How often? How long do they keep them? These are some questions you need to be asking them. Do they monitor your site? If they don't, I highly recommend you get some sort of software as a service that will monitor your site for you. Do they provide phone or escalated support? Can you get a hold of them at a moment's notice when something's really gone bad and wrong and that your site's down? And then, do they update the server software regularly? Ask them. Do they manage it for you? If they don't, then but you really like them, I highly recommend you hire somebody to help you manage it. And you can contact us if you have questions on that too. How fast are they servers too? And do they know how to optimize it if needed? It's kind of a nice bonus. Whether they can optimize or not may not be 100% necessary, but you do want to make sure it's fast and reliable. And then I just touched on the last one, or the next last one, which is reliability. How reliable is their service? Do you have testimonials you can look at? Do they guarantee an amount of uptime? So there's usually an uptime percentage. Ask them what their uptime percentage is. And can they finally scale and grow with you? So if you would like to go over the show notes for this, I highly recommend you go to ecommercemadeeasypodcast.com to visit our bulleted points to summarize this for you to help you be able to take actions on these steps. And if you have any questions at all, you can contact us there, or you can visit our sister website at bcsengineering.com. I will see you guys next week. Bye.